Hey everyone, I'm Tim Ward and welcome back to Garden Sense. Well, we didn't get as many emails as we usually get this time of year, but the emails that we are receiving have a lot to do with weather. We have people talking about how they haven't seen rain in over a month, and we have folks that are explaining that they have gotten so much rain that there are flood warnings. And again, it just depends on where you are. And so I know that slowdowns like this are usually attributed to weather patterns. That being said, we still have 3 emails that we want to review here today. So buckle up everyone, let's jump right in. The first question for today is from Lou. Hello Tim, is it okay to use the same growing medium year after year? So yes, you can use it in the same growing medium year after year, but I'll be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure what you mean. Obviously, certain plants like certain types of soil, all right? And that can be, whether this particular plant grows well in more sandy soil, these types of plants do better in well-composted soil, things like that. But at the end of the day, if you know the plant and it's growing well in whatever medium you've been growing it in, yes, you can absolutely continue to do that. The issue is going to be the nutrition that is found within that soil, because obviously soil can become depleted of nutrition. That's why it's so important to use things like turf truss on your lawn or garden truss in your gardens, because it puts a lot of that nutrition, it puts that potassium, it puts that nitrogen, it puts that iron in the soil, which is what those plants take in. And then, something like a kickstart is going to allow the plants to take in even more of that nutrition. So again, I'm not entirely sure exactly what you mean, but as a general rule, you don't need to switch growing mediums year after year. If you're having success and you know the plant is doing well in a particular type of soil or growing medium, then there's no need to change. You just have to make sure that it will continue to get the nutrition that it needs, and that's where soil amendments and things like that come into play. I'll be honest with you that unless your soil is too acidic or too alkaline, as long as you're using something like a garden truss, a plant truss, a turf truss, you shouldn't really need to add any additional supplements to your soil, because again, a lot of that nutrition is being put in by those products. So I hope that answers your questions. Again, I'm not entirely sure which direction you were trying to go with that, but as a general rule, if the plant is thriving in a particular growing medium, continue with that growing medium and just make sure that it's always getting the proper nutrition. Question number 2 is from Peter. Hi Tim, I've been using Kickstart almost every week on the lawn and plants. I have red ornamental mulch in the flower beds. Is it being absorbed by the roots? Well, first of all, I'm really glad you're using Kickstart. It's probably the best product that we sell just because of its versatility and how well it can promote healthy growth of whatever plant you're using it on. So kudos to you for using it. Now, in terms of your question, I'm not entirely sure what you're asking. Are you asking if the red dye itself is being absorbed by the plants, or if because you're using a red mulch, is the Kickstart being absorbed by the plant roots? So I'll answer both of those questions. First of all, if you're using a red dyed mulch, the dye itself should not be absorbed by the roots. However, with all mulch, if there are chemicals that are in that mulch, however it's manufactured, and those leach down into the soil, then absolutely your plants could absorb what those chemicals are, good or bad. However, the dye itself, no, that is not supposed to be absorbable by the plants. Now, if you're talking about whether or not Kickstart is absorbed, yeah, so the Kickstart is going to work its way through that layer of mulch down into the soil, which is then going to absorb the roots. Now, if you have a super duper thick layer of mulch, that could present a little bit of a problem. But again, one of the great benefits to Kickstart is not only can it be used as a soil drench, but you can also just use it as a topical solution, and you can just water the heck out of the plants and just spray down the foliage, and you're going to get the same benefits. So again, I'm not entirely sure which direction you were trying to go as far as whether it's absorbing some of the red dye or whether or not that red dye is somehow preventing the Kickstart from getting the roots. As long as it's not a super thick application of that red mulch, it's going to work its way into the roots because, again, it's applied with water. It's going to get down to the soil and it's going to be absorbed by the plant. But if you have a concern that maybe that's not happening, then absolutely use it as a foliar spray, drench the plants with it, and move on. The final question for today is from Kevin. Tim, can I use the Ortho Dial-N-Spray applicator for a broader application of image, or is the hand sprayer on each weed required? I have a lot of different broadleaf weeds like clover, dandelion, thistle, and more. It will take a while with a hand sprayer. So don't ask me why, but this is the one product prop that we have in the entire studio here, and I don't know why. We sell all sorts of products, but this is the only one we ever leave in here. So with this question, I thought I would bring it out. So this is the Ortho Dial-N-Spray applicator if you're not familiar with it. This is a perfect product to use with image, and here's how you would use it. You would take the bottle, all the contents of that image bottle, and you dump it right in here into this reservoir, basin, whatever you want to call it, right? Then you would actually set the dial, which is right here, to 4 ounces. What makes this thing really, really unique is that it automatically regulates how much of a product it's going to take in per gallon of water. So by setting it to 4, you are telling this, I only want 4 ounces of whatever's in this basin per 1 gallon of water that's going to be flowing through the hose. So then obviously you connect the hose right here, press this little button here, and bam, you can go to town on your entire lawn. I have used this for image and it works really, really well. I have also used a pump sprayer. It really just depends on the application. If you have a very small area that you are trying to target because you've got a little bit of an outbreak of dandelions or something like that in that area, I often just use the pump tank. But if I'm trying to cover my entire lawn, then this is absolutely what I would use. I've got a big 100-foot hose that I use, and it works really, really well. As long as you've got good water pressure, go ahead and put the image in here, and this is going to be a much faster and more efficient way to cover your entire lawn with that image weed killer. All right, everybody, just a couple final thoughts before we wrap up this week's video podcast. Folks, it's now August, and I already talked about Kickstart in this podcast, but again, I want to reiterate how important it is for your lawn and for your plants as we enter into August, and September is going to be here before we know it. These can be some very, very hot months, some very humid months, depending on where you are, and Kickstart is really going to help your plants survive because it's going to strengthen the root system. So head over to rosensonline.com and pick up some Kickstart. Just like last week, I also want to remind you that grubs are going to become active now, and so making sure that you have some 24-hour grub killer on hand if you start to see those signs is also very, very important. So again, this is the time of year where you might start to see some brown areas in your grass. That's usually a sign of grubs attacking the root system. So again, head over to Rosens Online and pick up some 24-hour grub killer. You'll be very, very glad you did. Now, folks, I'm getting a lot of emails about Gallery. People are asking me if it's going to be back in stock for the fall. I can tell you this, I've been talking with ProTrust and they are working on getting it manufactured. Folks, it's been a really, really tough year to keep certain products in stock and to get certain products manufactured. And obviously, ProTrust has been, working hard to make sure that we're getting as many products as we can and keeping them on our shelves. But it's just been a challenging year. We all know how great Gallery is, and I know you guys want it for the fall. ProTrust tells me that they are working on it and that we will have some. I just don't know exactly when. So please be patient. Honestly, it's probably a little bit early to be putting it down now anyway, but hopefully within the next several weeks, we can get that on the shelves. Obviously, as we enter into the fall, if you're not overseeding, you can also be thinking about putting down some Dimension to help prevent crabgrass and things like that. Putting down 2 applications of Dimension and 2 applications of Gallery every year really, really help prevent the weeds, and then you can use a product like Image to kill what those 2 products products aren't able to suppress. Now, folks, next week we are hoping to do our annual overseeding video. So we've been getting a lot of questions about when to start the overseeding process. So if you guys can wait until next week, I will walk you through step by step the process that we recommend in order to overseed your lawn this fall, so that it not only gets established before winter, but that come spring you're going to have the most beautiful, lush, green looking lawn in your neighborhood. Folks, as always, we really appreciate the time that you give us each and every day. Remember that if you have problems with your lawn, with your gardens, with your plants, make sure you send the email directly to me, tim@rosensonline.com. We then take those questions and we produce these weekly videos. And as I just said, we really appreciate the time that you spend with us. I hope that you folks have an amazing rest of the week. God bless.